Between January 1943 and August 1945, Soviet factories produced over 17,000 self-propelled guns that transformed from desperate improvisations into the most feared assault weapons on the Eastern Front. The SU-76, nicknamed Suka and Golozhopaya by crews who died from shrapnel raining through open fighting compartments, evolved into the massive ISU-152 beast killer that German tankers called Russian monsters, capable of destroying Tiger tanks at over 1,000 meters. From 13,932 SU-76 built in the chaos of 1942 to 3,242 ISU-152s that spearheaded the assault on Berlin. These vehicles embodied both the horror of mechanized warfare and the industrial might that crushed Nazi Germany. This is every Soviet self-propelled gun from the SU-76 to the ISU-152, explained. The crisis began in mid-1942 in the Kremlin's windowless conference rooms, where the State Defense Committee faced a catastrophic reality. Operation Barbarossa had destroyed massive numbers of Soviet artillery pieces in 6 months, leaving the Red Army's God of War doctrine in ruins. German Sturmgeschütz assault guns were proving devastatingly effective, providing mobile fire support that Soviet horse-drawn artillery could not match. Committee members studied captured Stu-G3 reports with growing alarm as German units advanced 800 kilometers into Soviet territory, with mechanized artillery leading the charge. Joseph Stalin himself demanded immediate action, declaring that Soviet forces needed mobile guns to match German innovations. Multiple prototype designs emerged from this desperate initiative, with the primary solution pairing the proven 76.2 mm Zs-3 field gun with the T-70 light tank chassis, creating what would become the SU-76. But speed trumped safety in every design decision, setting the stage for the deadly compromises that would follow. Soviet factories received production orders in late 1942 with instructions to begin immediate manufacture. Initial units rolled off assembly lines by year's end, with full production beginning in early 1943, each one a testament to Soviet industrial desperation and ingenuity. The SU-76 featured an open-top fighting compartment housing a crew of 4: commander, gunner, loader, and driver. Combat specifications included substantial weight with impressive speed, making it faster than most German tanks. The 76.2 mm Zis-3 gun provided adequate penetration against most German vehicles in 1942. But the open fighting compartment created immediate problems that engineers had not anticipated. Crews complained about vulnerability to overhead shrapnel, small arms fire, and weather exposure during the brutal Russian winter. Initial production suffered from transmission failures as the T-70 chassis struggled, with the added weight of the gun and ammunition. Factory workers welded armor plates around the gun mount, while leaving the top completely open, creating what one engineer described as a metal coffin with the lid removed. These early problems would plague the design throughout its service life, but production continued as Soviet forces desperately needed any mobile artillery they could get. Early 1943 marked the first delivery of SU-76s to Red Army training units near Moscow for combat evaluation. Crews immediately noticed the vehicle's most distinctive and dangerous characteristic: complete exposure from above. Artillery shells, aircraft bombs, and even small arms fire could rain directly into the fighting compartment, creating what tankers called a death trap on tracks. The nickname Suka, derived from the SU designation, quickly spread through training camps as crews expressed their frustration with the vehicle's vulnerabilities. A more colorful nickname, Golozhopaya, meaning bare-arsed, referenced the lack of roof protection that left crews exposed like infantrymen in a foxhole. Training exercises revealed additional problems, including poor crew communication due to engine noise and limited ammunition storage that required frequent resupply. Despite these issues, the SU-76 demonstrated impressive mobility and firepower that Soviet commanders desperately needed. The vehicle could keep pace with advancing tank units while providing direct fire support against German positions. Crews learned to compensate for the open top by wearing steel helmets at all times and developing rapid evacuation procedures when under artillery bombardment. By mid-1943, the improved SU-76M received formal acceptance into service, launching mass production that would eventually reach 13,932 units. The first taste of combat came during 1943 operations, where SU-76Ms joined Tank Corps in defensive actions. German panzer divisions included well-entrenched Panzer IV tanks and 75mm PaK-40 anti-tank guns that had proven deadly to Soviet armor. At 800 meters range, the SU-76s engaged German tanks attempting to counterattack through defensive positions. The ZIS-3 guns penetrated the German tanks' side armor with high-explosive anti-tank rounds, destroying several vehicles in intense fighting. Crews reported excellent visibility from the open fighting compartment, allowing commanders to spot targets and direct fire more effectively than enclosed tanks. But victory came at a terrible price when German PaK-40 guns responded with devastating accuracy. Multiple SU-76s took direct hits that killed numerous crew members and wounded several others as 75mm shells exploded inside the open compartments. The surviving crews described scenes of horror as shrapnel tore through their comrades while they struggled to return fire. Despite the losses, Soviet commanders declared the engagement a tactical success that demonstrated the SU-76's potential. The vehicle's mobility allowed it to advance with infantry units and provide immediate fire support against German strongpoints. This first combat test established the pattern that would define SU-76 operations. Devastating firepower coupled with appalling crew casualties that made it one of the most feared assignments in the Red Army. While the SU-76 struggled with battlefield survivability, Soviet engineers at Chelyabinsk were developing a completely different approach to self-propelled artillery. On January 24, 1943, the first SU-152 prototype emerged from the Chelyabinsk-Kirov plant, nicknamed Tankograd for its massive armored vehicle production. Built on the KV-1S heavy tank chassis, this behemoth mounted the massive ML-20S 152.4mm gun howitzer in a fully enclosed casemate. The crew operated in relative safety behind thick armor, a dramatic contrast to the exposed SU-76 crews. Combat weight reached substantial tonnage, making it one of the heaviest self-propelled guns in the world. The enormous gun could fire both high-explosive and armor-piercing shells, weighing over 40 kilograms each, capable of destroying any German tank at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. Soviet planners envisioned the SU-152 as a breakthrough weapon that could smash through German defensive lines and eliminate heavy tanks like the Tiger I that had proven nearly invulnerable to standard anti-tank guns. The vehicle's thick armor and powerful gun represented everything the SU-76 was not: heavily protected, devastatingly armed, and designed for direct confrontation with the strongest German armor. Initial tests at Chelyabinsk proved the concept sound, but the real validation would come in a dramatic trial that would earn the SU-152 its legendary nickname. Later, in 1943, Soviet testing programs validated the SU-152's design through extensive trials against captured German armor. Soviet test crews loaded armor-piercing shells and evaluated the gun's effectiveness against Tiger armor at various ranges. The massive 152mm gun demonstrated the ability to penetrate Tiger frontal armor effectively, validating the design concept. Test reports described the gun's devastating impact against German heavy tanks. This successful testing validated the SU-152's design and contributed to its nickname Zveroboy, or Beast Killer, from crews who witnessed the demonstrations. German intelligence reports from captured documents later revealed that Wehrmacht tank crews feared the Soviet 152mm guns more than any other anti-tank weapon. The psychological impact proved as important as the physical destruction, as German tankers began reporting Russian monsters that could penetrate Tiger armor at ranges where return fire was ineffective. Word of the successful trials spread through Red Army units, boosting morale among crews who had struggled against seemingly invincible German heavy tanks. The SU-152 had proven it could kill any German armor, but mass production would require overcoming enormous industrial challenges in the chaos of wartime Soviet industry. Following successful trials, the SU-152 entered production at the Chelyabinsk-Kirov plant. Initial output reached only 25 units per month as workers struggled to manufacture the complex gun mount and heavy armor plates required for the massive vehicle. The Chelyabinsk facility had been relocated from Leningrad during the German advance, forcing engineers to rebuild production lines while under constant pressure to increase output. Several hundred SU-152s would eventually emerge from the Tankograd facility, each one representing thousands of hours of skilled labor and precious steel allotments. The vehicle's size created logistical nightmares as railway cars groaned under the massive weight, and bridges required reinforcement to handle the enormous machines. Crews needed extensive training to operate the complex loading mechanisms required for the enormous 152mm shells. The ML-20S gun howitzer could fire both high-explosive rounds for bunker destruction and armor-piercing shells for tank killing, making crew training essential for combat effectiveness. Factory workers painted each SU-152 in standard dark green camouflage before delivering them to heavy self-propelled artillery regiments forming throughout the Soviet Union. These elite units received the best crews available as the Red Army recognized that the expensive vehicles required skilled operators to achieve their devastating potential. Production would continue throughout the war, but the SU-152's success led to an even more powerful evolution that would dominate the final years of combat. The engineering challenges that caused high SU-76 crew casualties began with design decisions made during early production. SU-76 designs were open-top from inception due to weight considerations and material shortages that forced engineers to prioritize speed and production volume. Crews received canvas tarps to provide minimal protection from weather, but these offered no defense against artillery shrapnel or aerial bombardment. Throughout 1943, casualty reports accumulated at the People's Commissariat for Tank Production as commanders documented crew losses from overhead fragmentation. Field inspectors investigated these reports during 1944, discovering the horrific scope of the problem. Investigation reports documented extensive crew losses from bomb and shell splinters from above, questioning why adequate overhead protection was not provided. The casualties included some of the Red Army's most experienced self-propelled gun crews, men who had survived German tank attacks only to die from shrapnel that proper armor could have deflected. Field commanders had repeatedly requested overhead protection, but production priorities focused on quantity over crew safety. Factory engineers responded by developing 10mm boilerplate roofs that could be retrofitted to existing vehicles and installed on new production units. The solution increased combat weight, but dramatically improved crew survival rates. Late war SU-76Ms featured these protective roofs, though many crews continued to prefer the open configuration for better visibility and easier escape from burning vehicles. November 1943 brought the introduction of an even more formidable beast killer when the ISU-152 entered production with significant improvements over its predecessor. Built on the IS-1 heavy tank hull, the ISU-152 featured frontal armor ranging from 90 to 160 millimeters, making it nearly invulnerable to German anti-tank guns at combat ranges. The improved design incorporated lessons learned from SU-152 combat operations, including better crew ergonomics and enhanced ammunition storage. Production began in December 1943 at Chelyabinsk, eventually reaching 3,242 ISU-152s by war's end. The vehicle featured a DSHK anti-aircraft machine gun for protection against German infantry and aircraft, addressing a critical vulnerability that had plagued earlier self-propelled guns. Later production units switched to the IS-2 hull, providing even greater protection and improved mechanical reliability. The ISU-152 represented the pinnacle of Soviet self-propelled gun development, combining devastating firepower with excellent protection in a package that could accompany assault units into the heaviest fighting. German intelligence reports described encounters with Russian 152mm monsters that could destroy Tiger tanks at ranges where return fire proved ineffective. The psychological impact on German crews became as important as the physical destruction, as Wehrmacht units began reporting ISU-152s as the most dangerous threat on the battlefield. These vehicles would prove their worth in the massive tank battles that would decide the war's outcome. Early 1944 brought the ISU-152 major combat tests during breakthrough operations in Ukraine. ISU-152s from heavy self-propelled artillery regiments supported Soviet front assaults on trapped German forces. German positions contained elements of multiple corps, including elite SS divisions with their complement of Panzer IV tanks and Jagdpanzer IV tank destroyers. Over several days of intense fighting, the ISU-152s demonstrated their devastating effectiveness by destroying numerous German tanks and armored vehicles during breakthrough operations. The massive 152mm guns penetrated German armor at ranges exceeding 1 kilometer, often destroying targets with single shots that detonated ammunition or fuel supplies. German after-action reports described the ISU-152s as Russian 152mm monsters that could penetrate Jagdpanzer IV armor despite its sloped frontal plate. Soviet crews reported excellent combat performance as the thick armor deflected German return fire, while the powerful guns eliminated target after target. Casualties remained relatively light, considering the intensity of the fighting, with several ISU-152s immobilized by mines and crew members killed or wounded. The psychological impact proved as significant as the physical destruction, as German units began avoiding areas where ISU-152s operated. This combat test established the vehicle's reputation as one of the most effective tank destroyers of the war, capable of engaging any German armor with confidence. The staggering scale of Soviet self-propelled gun production became apparent as factories across the Soviet Union converted to military production during 1944 and 1945. The SU-76 became one of the most produced Soviet armored fighting vehicles, with 13,932 units manufactured by war's end. Multiple factories contributed to SU-76 production, while overcoming enormous wartime manufacturing challenges. The Chelyabinsk facility manufactured 3,242 ISU-152s despite the enormous challenges of producing heavy armor in wartime conditions. Total self-propelled gun production exceeded 17,000 units across all types, representing a massive commitment of Soviet industrial capacity to mobile artillery. The cost advantage proved significant as an ISU-152 required only half the resources of an IS-2 tank while delivering superior anti-tank performance. Combat effectiveness statistics revealed that ISU-152s could engage Tiger tanks at ranges 500 meters beyond the German 88mm gun's effective penetration distance. This range advantage allowed Soviet crews to destroy German heavy tanks without facing return fire, fundamentally changing the dynamics of armored combat. The production achievement becomes even more remarkable considering that Soviet industry operated under constant threat of German bombing and with millions of skilled workers serving in frontline units. These numbers represented more than industrial statistics. They embodied the Soviet Union's determination to match German technological advantages through sheer production volume and innovative design. Spring 1945 marked the final test for Soviet self-propelled guns, as ISU-152s supported major front assaults on the last obstacles before Berlin. Marshal Georgy Zhukov deployed these vehicles in heavy self-propelled artillery regiments to spearhead breakthrough operations. The German defensive positions included Tigers, Panthers, Jagdpanzers, and extensive anti-tank gun emplacements manned by desperate Wehrmacht and SS units fighting for the Nazi capital. During the intense fighting, the ISU-152s demonstrated their devastating effectiveness by destroying German armored fighting vehicles while advancing through heavily fortified positions. Soviet crews reported successful engagements against heavily armored targets during the breakthrough operations. The massive 152mm high explosive shells proved particularly effective against German bunkers and gun positions, collapsing concrete fortifications that had withstood days of artillery bombardment. But German resistance remained fierce as 88mm flak guns and Panzerfaust anti-tank rockets extracted a heavy toll on the advancing Soviet armor. Multiple ISU-152s were lost to German fire during the initial assault, demonstrating that even the most heavily armored vehicles remained vulnerable to determined defenders. The battle represented the ultimate validation of Soviet self-propelled gun doctrine as mobile artillery spearheaded the final assault on Nazi Germany. These vehicles had evolved from desperate improvisations in 1942 to become the most feared assault guns on the Eastern Front. August 1945 brought an unexpected epilogue to the Soviet self-propelled gun story as modernized SU-76Ms engaged Japanese forces during the Manchurian campaign. The 6th Guards Tank Army deployed these vehicles against the Kwantung Army in operations that demonstrated their versatility beyond the European theater. Japanese Type 97 Chiha tanks proved hopelessly outmatched against even the lightest Soviet self-propelled guns as 76mm shells penetrated their thin armor with ease. During the campaign, the SU-76Ms engaged Japanese armor and positions, while suffering limited losses to various defensive measures that highlighted the ongoing vulnerability of open-topped fighting compartments. ISU-152s from the 7th Army provided long-range fire support by shattering Japanese bunkers at 2-kilometer range with devastating 152mm high-explosive rounds. The Pacific deployment proved that Soviet self-propelled guns could operate effectively in any theater against any opponent, validating the design concepts that had emerged from the desperate circumstances of 1942. These final operations completed a remarkable transformation that saw Soviet mobile artillery evolve from crude tank destroyers to sophisticated assault guns capable of supporting combined arms operations across multiple continents. The vehicles that had begun as emergency responses to German innovations had become the foundation of Soviet armored doctrine for the remainder of the Cold War. The human cost of operating Soviet self-propelled guns revealed the true price of mobile artillery warfare during the Great Patriotic War. SU-76 losses totaled several thousand vehicles, representing high attrition rates that made it one of the most dangerous assignments in the Red Army. ISU-152 casualties reached several hundred. Units with significant losses during the Berlin operations, though crew survival rates remained significantly higher due to superior armor protection. Crews developed strong preferences for specific vehicle types based on their combat experiences and survival expectations. Most SU-76 crews actually preferred the open-top configuration despite its vulnerability because it allowed rapid escape from burning vehicles and provided excellent visibility for target acquisition. The psychological stress of operating in exposed fighting compartments created unique challenges as crews faced constant anxiety about overhead threats that could kill them instantly without warning. Veterans reported that the sound of incoming artillery shells created particular terror for SU-76 crews, who knew that shrapnel would rain directly into their fighting compartment. ISU-152 crews enjoyed greater protection, but faced different challenges, including carbon monoxide poisoning from the massive gun and claustrophobic conditions inside the enclosed casemate. Training programs attempted to prepare crews for these realities, but combat experience remained the only true teacher for surviving in mobile artillery units. The bonds between crew members became extraordinarily strong as men depended on each other for survival in some of the most dangerous combat conditions of the war. Soviet self-propelled guns concealed numerous secrets and surprising design features that remained hidden from German intelligence throughout the war. Some ISU-152 models featured limited radio equipment, forcing crews to rely on alternative communication methods during combat operations. This communication gap created coordination problems that sometimes resulted in friendly fire incidents when multiple vehicles engaged the same target. Experimental projects included various prototype modifications that attempted to improve mobility and performance, but most proved mechanically unreliable and were abandoned after limited testing. The SU-76 primarily served as infantry support rather than dedicated tank destroyer, with most missions involving artillery support rather than anti-tank operations. German crews often reported SU-76 tank kills that were actually artillery positions destroyed during counter-battery fire missions. Soviet engineers experimented with numerous ammunition types, including concrete-piercing rounds for bunker destruction and incendiary shells for destroying supply depots. The ISU-152's interior provided improved crew comfort compared to cramped tank fighting compartments. Factory workers sometimes inscribed personal messages inside vehicles during production, creating a hidden communication network between workers and frontline crews. These details reveal the human dimension of Soviet armored vehicle production and the ingenuity required to overcome wartime material shortages. The challenges of determining accurate combat statistics from wartime records highlight the complexities surrounding Soviet self-propelled gun effectiveness. Soviet sources claimed extensive German tank kills by self-propelled guns, but post-war analysis suggests these figures include numerous double counts and misidentified targets. Verified combat results show significant but more modest achievements than contemporary Soviet reports claimed. The inflation resulted from multiple factors, including crew excitement during combat, propaganda requirements for maintaining morale, and bureaucratic pressure to justify expensive vehicle programs. German records often contradicted Soviet claims, showing tanks reported as destroyed returning to service after repairs or listing losses to other causes entirely. The strategic impact proved more significant than individual kill counts, as Soviet self-propelled guns forced fundamental changes in German tactical doctrine and tank deployment patterns. Wehrmacht units began avoiding areas where ISU-152s operated, effectively ceding battlefield control to Soviet forces even when the vehicles were not present. The psychological warfare value exceeded the physical destruction, as German crews developed increasing reluctance to engage targets that might include hidden assault guns. Perhaps most importantly, Soviet self-propelled guns achieved their primary objective of shifting Red Army artillery from 80% horse-drawn in 1942 to fully mechanized by 1945, enabling the rapid advances that characterized the war's final campaigns. The iron legacy of Soviet self-propelled guns extends far beyond their World War II service into modern military doctrine and historical preservation efforts. Museums at Kubinka and Verkhnaya Pishma maintain operational examples that allow researchers to study the vehicle's technical characteristics and combat effectiveness decades after the war's end. Military academies throughout the world teach the cost-effectiveness principles demonstrated by Soviet self-propelled gun programs, particularly the ISU-152's strong performance against German heavy tanks. The cultural impact continues through historically accurate video games like War Thunder that model precise ballistics and combat characteristics, introducing new generations to these remarkable machines. Classic films including Liberation feature authentic ISU-152 assault sequences that capture the vehicle's devastating battlefield presence and tactical employment. Academic studies continue to analyze the production statistics, with the 13,932 SU-76 figure representing one of the most thoroughly documented armored vehicle programs in military history. Modern armies study Soviet self-propelled gun doctrine when developing contemporary assault gun and tank destroyer concepts. The transformation from the crude SU-76 Suka to the mighty ISU-152 Beast Killer represents one of the most remarkable engineering achievements of the 20th century. These vehicles proved that desperate circumstances could drive revolutionary innovations when combined with industrial determination and tactical necessity. From the crew members who died from overhead shrapnel to the German tanks destroyed at Silo Heights, Soviet self-propelled guns embodied both the horror and triumph of mechanized warfare. Their story remains a testament to the human cost of technological progress and the enduring power of military innovation born from existential necessity.